So today we're going to be talking about tariffs and refunds. So most fashion brands have accepted tariffs as just another cost of doing business. So millions are now discovering that they've may have overpaid, and some of that money could actually come back to them, which is great news for a lot of brands. And today we're breaking down what changed and what CAPE actually is, who qualifies for the refunds, and what apparel and footwear importers should be doing right now. So today we're joined by Kimberly Killgore and Jerry Williams from Krieger Worldwide. Kimberly and Jerry work directly with importers, navigating customs compliance, brokerage services, duties, and now CAPE refund filings every day. So this is real world operational insight. Can you give us a little bit quick introduction about yourselves and your company?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Kimberly. I'm the manager of client services here at Krieger Worldwide. And just like Shahrooz said, this is something we live and breathe every day. We are a customs brokerage firm. We're also an international freight forwarder. We're celebrating 60 years of exceptional service, and we actually started out as a customs broker. So our roots are really deep in compliance focus and ensuring that all of our importers are importing correctly, efficiently, and part of that is managing things like CAPE and IEPA refunds. So this is something we handle on a regular basis, and we're excited to join this discussion.
And then I'm Jerry Williams. So I am part of our customs compliance team here at Krieger Worldwide, and I'm just excited to help break this down for your importers.
So exciting to have you guys with us today. So let's start a little bit about from the beginning. There's a lot of confusion around all of this. Can you walk us through what the tariffs originally were, what changed legally, and why this has become a major issue for importers and figuring out these refunds?
Sure. So last February 2025, President Trump issued a series of tariffs under IEPA. Those started off as the fentanyl tariffs, which were targeting China, Canada, and Mexico. And the idea was to tariff those countries because they were not properly stopping the flow of fentanyl into the country. That ended up getting expanded into the reciprocal tariffs, which started in April 2025 and were designed to target trade imbalances across the different countries. So importers for about a year were paying these tariffs, which ranged from an extra 10% to an extra 125% in trade remedy duties. In February of 2026, the Supreme Court ruled that IEPA tariffs were not lawfully collected. And as such, CBP has designed a program called CAPE, which is within the ACE portal. And what it does is it helps refund those tariffs back to the importer of record since they were unlawfully collected.
I got it. Okay, that's great. That's great information. So now let's talk about this CAPE and the refund opportunity because people hear that term and they still don't understand what it really means. And you guys actually created a really simple guidebook that you were showing me, and we have that available for the audience. So the audience can fill out a form at our website, AIMS360.com, ACE guide, to grab that guide out of there. We'll also show QR code on the screen for that. If you guys want to do that. So tell us a little bit, what is CAPE in the practical terms, and how does ACE connect to this? What does ACE mean, and what's the refund opportunity, and what should how does somebody go about figuring that out?
Yeah, so CAPE is essentially the mechanism within the ACE portal for which importers can use to process their refunds. So the ACE portal is the automated environment for CBP for importers to be able to go in there and pull reports related to their import history. It's a really great tool, a very underutilized tool by most importer, which is why we did create that guidebook. So for many of our clients and for importers, across different industries, we are finding that amid the IEPA refunds and having to have an active ACE portal to collect your refunds, many importers had never entered the ACE portal before, and they're not familiar with how to add users, how to pull reports from it. So we have that guidebook available to get you to those initial steps, because once you file your CAPE filing, you'll need to be able to navigate within ACE to track those refunds. So CAPE is the mechanism within ACE to process your refund. And the CAPE filing is for IEPA-specific refunds that are eligible, IEPA-specific entries that are eligible for refunds. And so one of the issues that we often run into is we have importers and they're ready to process their refund, but they've never been into ACE. And so they also haven't opted into electronic refunds through ACE. And through CAPE and this program established by CBP, the only way to receive your refund is electronically. So one of the first steps that we advise all importers is activate your ACE account, log into ACE, opt into your electronic refunds, and then process your CAPE filing. This is all done within CAPE.
Got it. I see. And a lot of the brands maybe still don't know, oh, am I owed money or not? So when it comes to auditing for the refund opportunities, is that process done in ACE, and what does that process actually involve? And where are companies like making mistakes figuring out, oh, am I owed money or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. It can be done through ACE. So ACE is, like I said, an amazing tool. It has access to all of your import records. What we have found is many importers who are relying on multiple brokers to process their entries. If they have a fragmented supply chain, then they need to rely heavily on ACE to aggregate all of their data to be able to ensure that entries aren't being missed and that they are fully processing every applicable entry. On the contrast, if you have a streamlined supply chain, if you've consolidated your services and you're housing most of your entries between one or two brokers, then often we're seeing for the more specialized customs brokerage firms like ourselves, we are working in tandem with our importers to consolidate that information for them. So we can pull reporting that says, here are the entries that were hit by IEPA tariffs. Here's what we anticipate the amount of the refund will be. And we can actually assist with filing the CAPE filing for you. The way CBP designated this tool and the rules around it are, when you are filing for your CAPE refund, there are only two ways to file for it. The importer of record can file for all of their applicable entries, or the customs broker that filed the specific entry can file on behalf of the importer. So that just goes back to, if you're juggling many different brokers, then you really need to look into ACE, pull your own data, ensure that every entry is being accounted for. If you're operating with one or two brokers, if you've consolidated it down, work in hand with your customs broker. Many brokers are assisting with CAPE filings, and they can ensure that all of your entries are being included.
Got it. So at AIMS360, that's a very good information. At AIMS360, we deal with a lot of fashion companies. And fashion companies, they just have massive SKU counts, and they have frequent shipments. There are multiple countries that they source from, and a lot of times tight margins. So why are apparel footwear companies especially impacted when it comes to CAPE filings and refunds, especially when they're sourcing from multiple countries? There's also tracking duties, individual products and materials. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Great question. So what we have found for many of our fashion importers, just like you said, high SKU count, multiple country of origins from their sourcing. So it's not a one size fits all. IEPA changes based on the country of origin. It can change from the materials. So what we have found is for fashion importers that are importing from all of these different areas, many different products, consolidating that data and ensuring that when they're auditing their files and coming up with their compliance strategy behind the CAPE refund, because every time you do your CAPE filing, you want to ensure that I'm declaring this to CBP that I'm eligible for these returns. So ahead of that declaration, the importer needs to validate that that entry information is correct. So I'm going to look for what country of origin is listed on the entry, the product, is everything looking correct? Was the correct HTS code used? And so having the correct information for importers in their internal system and then marrying that up with the entry information that was submitted to CBP is very important, because you have to be able to justify this refund should CBP pull you for a compliance audit. We have seen that happen where CBP is looking into different entries that were submitted and maybe requesting more information. They're validating that everything was correct. So ultimately, the burden is on the importer to ensure that what's declared is accurate. So ensuring that you have the tools internally to validate that is your first step, and what needs to be done ahead of declaring. And that is complex for fashion importers.
Yes, and you said internal systems, and that's where a lot of the operations and reporting in AIMS 360 becomes important when working with these brands. So what we see from the AIMS 360 side is many brands struggle because the product data sourcing, duties, HTS are all disconnected across multiple systems. So AIMS brings that all together, and the AIMS 360 software helps centralize that information so that brands can quickly look it up and they have visibilities into all of that stuff, the countries of origin, the imported products, who are the vendors, all the vendor information. A lot of times we even keep the contracts in there, the HTS codes, all of that information is stored in the AIMS 360 software. So our clients are able to quickly look up that information so that they can make sure when they're doing their CAPE filings, they have all the right details for that. So yeah, that's a very important part of the strategy, is not only uh, filling out all the information with the CAPE refunds, but also being able to get the information together. So this is where the planning is important, is that we always tell people, oh, make sure you put in all the information in your software, right? And if they don't put it in their AIMS 360 software, if they're not even using a software like that, it just makes it a lot more difficult to figure this out. Okay. So let's discuss a little bit here about, if I'm a fashion importer and I haven't started reviewing this yet, is there anything else that I should be doing immediately, or asking my broker or internal team to do? What would be the next step I should ask them to do?
Yeah, so the first thing that any importer should do today is validate that they have ACE access set up. That's the first step. And then in tandem with that, they should be working with operations at a minimum to ensure that they've identified eligible entries, what the filing status is on those entries. They can estimate an expected refund value. They can watch for liquidation timelines. And that is where you can really work in tandem with your customs broker to help validate all of that information. Not every importer understands what each of those different line items means, and your broker should be walking you through that. You're also going to want to look into if there are any PSCs or protests, things that you just need to be aware of ahead of filing. So that would be step one. Today, I would make sure I have ACE access, and I would begin at a minimum pulling together my eligible entries, their liquidation statuses, and talking to my team about what this refund could look like.
Love it. I'm sure Krieger can help them a lot in these processes. So I'm sure they'll be contacting you. What happens after filing? Because filing is obviously the beginning. Should companies realistically expect next steps after that, or what are some unknowns of what's going to happen after the filings are submitted? Is there people that have already gotten refunds, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, yes, there are people receiving their refunds, and it is faster and sooner than anyone anticipated. So, it's a really exciting time. So, first and foremost, it is not an overnight process. So, when you file your CAPE declaration, you'll receive a status update if it was accepted. If any entries were rejected, they'll tell you why, and that may require additional auditing internally. But once all of your entries move under accepted status, that's where you go and you start monitoring reports through the ACE portal to watch for that refund status. And you'll see an update on when the refund is being processed and sent to Treasury. And what you really need to be doing internally is coming up with how you need to manage that data. For some importers, this may be as clean as, great, this is money coming straight back to us that we can use on other things. For other importers, these different refunds may need to be reconciled on a by entry level, depending on how it was paid out for buyers. Each importer has a very different, unique scenario related to these IEPA refunds. So the first step is activating ACE, filing it, and then comes into monitoring and using the reporting. Again, that's available in the guidebook to really manage expectations of your financial department of when those refunds will come in. We are giving a 60 to 90 day window of an expected refund. That was advised by CBP. For importers, we have seen some of that being processed much faster. So every importer, again, will be different. So some may take that full 90 days. Some may already be seeing those refunds processed. We definitely have heard different strategies of maybe staggering or different approaches. There's a lot of noise out there about how to leverage this CAPE filing approach, but we've really just kind of seen, if you're eligible, if your entries are accurate, then go ahead and file for that refund and get your money back.
So exciting. So, just I know it's still the beginning, but how many of these have you guys filed yourselves about?
That's a great question. We have filed in the multi-millions worth of refunds in the first 2 weeks of it being open. We have hundreds of clients that are eligible. So, like I said, every client works on their own timeline. And as a specialized broker, we always adhere to the directive and the goals of our clients. So for some, we process them through right away. We have quite a queue still that we're working through based on their designated timelines that we've seen. I believe that CBP is in the 30 billions of refunds already. Jerry, is that correct? As far as the volume of refunds that have been entered through CAPE successfully.
Yes, and importers have already begun to start receiving their refunds. So if they filed in that first week that it was open and entries were either reliquidated or liquidated without the IEPA tariffs, those refunds began to hit their bank accounts this week, which is great.
Got it. So over the next 12 months, like what are some of the knowns and unknowns that brands should expect around trade compliance, refunds, enforcement? What do you think that companies need to adapt to going forward so that they don't struggle?
I think a contingency plan. I think what we've learned over the past 2 years is that anything can happen, and having cushion in your budgets to account for very quick changes is important. We know that the Section 122 tariffs are under discussion right now on whether or not they're lawful. There's a possibility that they could go down a very similar route as IEPA. But on the contrary, you have Section 232 or Section 301 tariffs, which from an industry-wide perspective, we anticipate those only to expand. So even if you're not being subject to a Section 122 tariff in the future, you may be subject to a new Section 232 tariff that you're not subject to today. So financial departments, importers, they need to start looking at tariffs as somewhat of a moving target, which is difficult to plan for, but the reality of our current climate. So they need to have reserves and buckets and just a contingency plan so that their supply chain isn't fully disrupted if a temporary tariff does come in place.
There are also
I love that.
2 open Section 301 investigations going on right now that are targeting 90% of the United States trading partners. So we do anticipate that even when Section 122 does expire on July 24th, 2026, there may be Section 301s by that point in place to replace them. So it's something we're monitoring. It's something that all importers should be keeping an eye on to see if those Section 301 investigations progress further and become actual 301 tariffs. So everybody should be monitoring those 2 open investigations.
Yeah, this is like one of the most complex sourcing environments I've ever seen, working in the apparel industry. And these companies that are winning, they're really reacting to the tariffs and building systems and visibility and operational discipline so that they can adapt quickly. So this is great information, great learning from you guys. And it's good to know that you guys are always on top of this, right? And Krieger has been helping everybody with this, because it's just people are already trying to run their business every day, right? And they don't have time to research all these tariff things all the time, right? So it's
Right.
great to hear about this and learn about this. So thank you for joining us today. It's really exciting to have you on the AIMS360 podcast and get to know you guys and get a little bit more information on all this CAPE filing and refunds.
Thank you so much for having us. We love to be here. And, as like you said, importers don't always have the time to learn it, but fortunately, Jerry and I and the Krieger family, we have a passion for it. So we're always happy to chat it out with any of your clients.
Yes, and Jerry's so nice. He's always talking to the brands and giving them information as well. So we love working with you guys and going through this. Thank you for your time again.
Thank you.